All right, welcome to another edition of Mob Talk. I'm Dave Schratwieser.
And I'm George Anastasia.
George, here we go again. Reliable sources telling us that the FBI is now looking again at mob murders here in Philadelphia. Squad 1 on the job.
Yeah, there's at least 6, and the statute never runs on that, so anything can happen.
All right, George, Squad 1, the FBI's organized crime squad, now back on the case from what we hear, looking into mob murders. There's plenty to look into there.
Yeah, there's at least a half dozen, and these things never go away. You've got an organization putting itself back together on the streets, and you've got some new faces in the FBI office who I think in part want to make a name for themselves. The other thing is, there are guys in law enforcement who literally believe the wise guys on the streets have gotten away with murder, and they want to make those cases.
All right, now what's the fear, the buzz in the clubhouses with the guys? I'm sure they know what they did, and it's kind of behind them at this point, but they don't. It really may not be.
Well, I mean, they know it never goes away, and you're exactly right. Ronnie Previty used to say, we know what we did and we know what our culpability is. That sits out there. A lot of these guys are trying to legitimize themselves or quasi-legitimize themselves. A lot of them have been away to jail. They don't want to go back. I can understand that. But this is a dark cloud that hangs over them. They know what they were involved in, and the question is, are the feds going to be able to put together enough evidence to make a case? The feds are not going to come willy-nilly. They're not going to come like they did before.
No.
If they're going to come, they're going to have something solid. And I think right now they're trying to build that.
All right, let's talk about a few of these hits. Johnny Casasanto. That's one of the ones at the top of the list all the time that they like to solve. There were names floating around about 3 different guys involved, high-ranking guys. Where's that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one case where I think law enforcement knows what happened. They just don't have enough to put it together. So you've got that. You've got Dutchie Ivacoli. I mean, that Ralph Natali and a couple other people talked about the hows and whys of that case. You've got Long John Mortarano. You got Ronnie Turchi. You got Ralph Mazuka hit with some affiliation from organized crime, according to at least one witness. So it goes on and on and on.
Tony Tora hit.
Yeah, Tony Tora. There's so many different mob hits that have not been brought to trial that there's enough out there to make a case if the feds can build enough evidence to say, here, we got it now. I don't think they're there yet.
All right, can they go at the whole team, though? I mean, some of the guys were in jail at the time. Other guys are out on the street. Did they confer on these murders? Could they have conferred? What do you think?
Well, I mean, from what we know about some of the murders we're talking about, there was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys involved one way or another. So yeah, you're talking about a RICO conspiracy murder case. That's what we're talking about. So yeah, I think it's a way to attack the organization. And if you talk about 5 or 6 of these murders, different guys involved in different ones, you're going to have quite a few individuals in the docket.
Yeah, and as you say, the statute of limitations on murder
it never goes away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one crime that never goes away, and I think they're aware of it. You know, it's funny, people talk about the hit on Nicky Scarfo Jr. and Dante and Luigi's. It wasn't a murder. You can't do much with that case anymore because it's so old.
Sure.
But an actual murder never goes away.
The wise guys got to get tired of this. They keep talking about go after the terrorists, chase this, chase that. We just had the Barcelona situation. Right. I'm sure Eddie Jacobs, who's Joey Merlino's lawyer, has said time and time again, spend the taxpayers' dollars on something more worthy. Chase the terrorists, don't chase these mob guys.
We hear that all the time, and there's some legitimacy to that argument. However, you know, when you're talking about urban terrorism, these murders we're talking about are part of what you would describe as urban terrorism. So the feds can justify going after that if they can make the case.
All right, let's talk about, you must need a cooperator, I think, here
always.
to do this. You can't just come with old evidence. You can't come with former cooperators who you bring back in, who they have been interviewing, again, from what I hear, along with family members of some of the victims, those kind of things. So we know this is an active situation, but do you need a first-rung cooperator here?
I mean, look at the successful cases we've had. In the Scarfo era, it was Nick Caramondi and Tommy Del Giorno. They were involved in shootings. They were physically there. They testified. In the Stanford case, you had Phil Coletti. You had 2 or 3 other shooters. That's what makes the case. When you've got somebody who says, I was there, this is what we did, here's who told us to do it, and there's where we buried the guns. And then the FBI recovers the guns, and you've got all of that stuff. In those cases, they came with successful prosecutions. More recently, they haven't been able to do that.
A guy like John Veazey.
John Veazey is another example of that. Veazey, Phil Coletti, you know, you may not like those guys, but they were highly effective witnesses because of what they had done and what they said on the witness stand.
All right, excuse the pun, but you need a caliber witness like that, don't you?
I think you do, and I think the feds are cognizant of that. I think the prosecutor's office is not going to come half-baked again. They don't want to be embarrassed. So if they come with a RICO murder case, it's going to be because they got somebody who was intimately involved in one of the murders who's willing to get up and say, here's what I did, here's why I did it, here's who told me to do it.
All right, George, one of the names that always comes up here is Anthony Nicodemo, who just went away for a 30-year plus sentence, third-degree murder charges. They seem to be worried about Anthony Nicodemo. His lawyer tells me he's the last of the Mohicans. Omerta, not going to talk, not cooperating, none of that. But he was recently moved to a prison much closer to Philadelphia. He was way out in northwestern Pennsylvania. Now he's 125 miles from Philly.
Yeah, and is that move to bring him closer to his family as something because he's been on good behavior, or is it a move to bring him closer to people who might want to talk to him? Everything I know about Nicodemo is, and on the streets, he's a stand-up guy. Nobody thinks he's going to flip. But he's certainly one of the individuals that could help make a case, maybe more than one case, if he should decide to.
Why do you think that?
Well, yeah, you know, he was involved in the one hit we know about, the DiPietro hit.
Gino DiPietro.
Right, and he's been around these guys. I mean, he's been around these guys for 4 or 5 years. He was a player, no doubt about that. But so far, and I think his lawyer's correct. I mean, in the description of him that you're hearing from the lawyer is the same description I'm hearing. He's strong. Yeah. He's a stand-up guy. Is that worth spending 30 years in jail? I mean, at some point, I think you got to say to yourself, why am I doing this? But some of these guys don't think that way. And
talk about close to the boss. We have some video of him walking with Joe Legambia, a little walk and talk over in South Philadelphia. That's the top rung, alleged boss, and Nicodemo walking together.
Anthony Nicodemo was, I think, the next generation of organized crime in Philadelphia. He was part of the young heads, the young Turks that were coming, being brought up and being groomed, and he's paid a price for that.
All right, there's another guy mentioned in that murder. We're not going to get into his name right now. High-ranking guy, also moving up in the ranks right now. I'm sure they'd like to have him too.
Absolutely. There's several guys, and what you need are pressure points. You need to be able to go to somebody and say, you're doing 5, 10 years in prison, you think you're coming home in 2 years, you're not going to come home because we're going to indict you again. Or you like it out here in the streets, we're going to bring an indictment and you're going to go away for life. Those are the pressure points you need to have. And you can only do that if you've got the evidence and if you've got the case that you can make. You can't bluff that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Can they put a guy working undercover in the Philly mob? They did it once before in the last case. It didn't work out great, but the undercover did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, we see that again and again with undercovers, whether it's an undercover agent or whether it's a cooperator. I mean, Ronnie Previty wore a wire for a year and a half. So yeah, it can be done. I think you would think, given the track record of this organization, that they would be cautious, but you never know.
All right, that's another episode of Mob Talk to Sit Down. Remember, you can catch us on YouTube at Mob Talk to Sit Down. I'm Dave Schratwieser.
And I'm George Anastasia.
See you next time.